G'day everyone. So I'm here with Joe Van Elsen, who's CEO of Pampa. You guys all know how much I like Pampa and constantly write about it on the publication. So it's good to have him finally on.
Thanks for having me.
Oh mate, so where are you at the moment? You're in Melbourne and you've just returned from Argentina, I believe.
Yeah, so back in Melbourne the last couple of weeks and then heading on to Canada this weekend. So obviously we've had results out this week. Canada remains the home of the majority of our investors. So the next 3 weeks is meeting with existing investors and hopefully a few new ones to be able to register.
Okay, mate. Well, you've got some great results to show on. Released yesterday, I think 800 meter interval. I'm going to say 0.4 copper and 0.5 gold. So huge interval of gold and copper returned to the market. You must be very excited.
Yeah, look, I mean, very excited. I think that's a fantastic hole. And dare I say, there aren't too many holes out there in the market, in the name of companies with a 20 mil market cap. So I think that's, an exceptional hole. A little bit surprised by the market response. So we are trading at 30 cents, which relative to where we've come from in our last couple of placements is still a strong price, but I was expecting a bit more. I'm just going to share a screen here, so I'll show you when I say the actual results, this is just the press release itself. So what we got was an 855 meter hole. This is our third hole. And from 54 meters through to the end of the hole, that's an 801 meter interval at 0.4 copper, 0.51 gold, and not insignificant silver of 2.87. The high grade interval within that, starting from 192 meters down to 710, so that's 518 meters at 0.53 copper, 0.73 gold, and 3.45 grams of silver. So within that, you then get a little bit of a enriched zone, which starts from 192 meters down to about 368 meters. So that's one of those supergene copper enrichment kickers that has taken the grade up to 0.71 copper, with gold remaining consistent with that broader interval at around 0.74. Plus you've got 4.86 grams of silver. So you're talking a very, very high grade interval. And what we're showing here with these two smaller intervals of 64 and 32 meters is that it remains mineralized right through to depth. So 554 down to 618 meters, you've got 7.75 copper, 1.2 grams of gold, 4.6 of silver, and then from 642 meters, you've got 32 meters at 0.64, 0.71, and 4.54 silver. So
sorry, mate, that interval just before the 64 meter one with the really elevated gold, the 1.2 grams per ton gold. What was the visuals on that interval? Were they just like really intensely veined, or were they more down into the hypogene? What did that actually look like? Just out of curiosity.
Just density of veining. So we went through some sections where there was quite, intense veining. And we took 2 meter samples. I think our highest gold value over 2 meters was 5 grams. And we got a couple of sort of, 2 or 3 grams. And that was simply linked to vein density.
Right. Yeah.
So what we're seeing here, and obviously this is only our third hole on the property, is that it's a multi-phase system. So there are various phases throughout the system, all of which are mineralized. And what we found at the end of hole down at 855 meters, we were still in good mineralization. We weren't in the juicy, 0.7 type mineralization, but we were certainly still in the system, still in grade. And we don't think we'd found sort of the bornite core or the source of the bornite. So with a different balance sheet and with different requirements, this hole would have continued down at least another couple of 100 meters.
Okay, so that hole was pulled up because of what was the reason it wasn't drilled any further?
So we had a few issues. That's probably too strong a word. With the drilling contractor, we started getting low returns from about 800 meters. So I think to push this beyond, we were getting down to rates of 15, 16 meters a day. So perhaps we could have kept pushing it, but it was getting quite costly. And there's also a steep gap in the per meter drilling cost after about 900 meters. So, but when I say it was largely a commercial decision, we weren't if we were in the highest grade part of the system, we would have kept drilling, but we weren't. And look, this serves our purposes for this third hole. And I've just brought up here the section that illustrates where where this hole was located and the direction.
Yeah, looks fantastic. This one drilled slightly steeper at 75 degrees, and Pearkennis drill hole number 2 was, I'm going to say 65 degrees or something like that. 60. Yeah. So just defined a very nice cross section there. What are the plans going forward? So 3 holes completed in this drill program. Yeah, that's it. I imagine. So now I imagine the field season's getting close to being over in San Juan up that high altitude.
Look, it is. So what we've started doing, and I think just for background and context, we acquired this property. It was on the 30th of November last year, and we were rushing to do that deal in order to get some drilling in this season. So we knew we'd acquired a property that had a historic body of work, but what we didn't want to do was miss this window of opportunity to get in and do some holes. So as we approached, I guess, the back end of this drill campaign, we started looking at the historical geophysics and the surface mapping and the surface work, if you like, that had been done on the property with a view to developing a property-wide exploration program. So Pearkennis Central, which is what we've been drilling, and as you know, having been there, it's a relatively small portion of the overall property, which sits at about 1,900 hectares. So we focused on it for this program simply because it was the known mineralization. We wanted to validate grade, try and show that there's some size to this structure before moving on to other targets, including Pearkennis East, which you've also visited and which is, 500 odd meters as the crow flies from here. So the work that's begun now is all about reinterpretation of the IP, the HaliMag, the surface mapping, with a view to actually trying to build up a pipeline of drill targets outside Pearkennis Central and outside Pearkennis East, which we think is already sort of drill ready, and those targets are well defined.
Yeah, great. And obviously very interesting area you're in. I talk about a lot in this publication, this southern portion of San Juan, where you've got Antofagasta, one of the biggest mines in Chile, literally just over the border. You can almost see it from El Pachon, which is another behemoth that Glencore own in Argentina that is not developed, but they're basically keeping a very close eye on it and maintaining all the infrastructure, drilling out the deposit. And yeah, it looks like it's the whole area is kind of ready to just kick off into mining mode in the short-term future. Is that sort of correct to say?
Yeah, look, what I'll do is I'll just bring up a map here that gives some context to your comments there. So this map that I'm about to show, I think, is a great map, and I think it very clearly identifies the thematic that you're referring to there. So this is San Juan, and the lighter shaded area is the Chilean side. So Pilkenes is down here in the southern portion of San Juan, and our property, I'm going to throw a guess out there. I mean, we must be only 10 k's or so from the border. You yourself, having been there, may recall that stat better than I do, but we're talking about a deposit, very, very proximate to the border. Our immediate neighbour is Altar, so Aldebaran. And then this dot here is Los Pelambres. It's the Antofagasta mine, which in 2022 produced 275,000 tonnes of copper and 40-odd thousand ounces of gold. And that is almost perpendicular with the El Pachon deposit, which is the Glencore property through which we access Pilkenes, which is that undeveloped 1.6 billion tonne project at 0.55 copper.
Which is the biggest copper resource in Argentina. I just want to make that clear. You guys are right next to the biggest resource that Argentina has just sitting there. So yeah, very, very important stat.
And if I had to guess, it would probably be the second biggest would be Los Azules.
Exactly. No, it is. Yes. That's exactly correct.
Yeah. Whether that's 100 k's or 80 k's as the crow flies, that's very proximate to our deposit. As you're also aware, that's accessed from a different road. So our access point is from the town of Barrial, which is the same shared access point as El Pachon and Altar. But Los Azules is from the town of Calingasta. So, I mean, to go back to your point there, this is an area where there are major world-class deposits on the Chilean side, operating mines, I should say, and on the Argentine side, there aren't any today. So the flagship operating mine in San Juan is the Veladero Barrick Gold project. That's a gold operation. They're targeting 2024 production of 420 to 480,000 ounces, which is obviously globally significant.
That's the massive.
But yeah, as at today, there's no sort of copper operating mines. So the consequence of that is that as the grade and the profile of the Chilean properties depletes, people are looking for the next obvious stepping point. And if you were a company such as Antofagasta, the logical point is along the same mineral belt on the other side of the border.
Well, they think actually he's made comments about how closely the CEO of Antofagasta says he's recently on he's liking of El Pachon, and if Glencore aren't going to do anything with it, he's indicated that they might come in and take a closer look at it, which is very interesting. And off the back of what is going to Congress tomorrow, which is the May Pact in Argentina, which is also very important for foreign investment. The whole area looks very interesting.
So if I was being cynical, I'd say that they were trying to pressure the Argentine government to force Glencore to develop the project, or alternatively give it to Antofagasta. So look, undoubtedly there's a lot of interest in the sector. When I say the sector, the San Juan copper sector, that's evident in our immediate neighbour, which has South 32 as their second biggest shareholder at 15%. You've also had Teck running around, active in copper exploration. So look, it's definitely a hotbed. There's a lot of interest, a lot of money going into it. And that's without even touching the northern part of the province, which is where you've got the Lundin family and associated companies. Jose Maria, Filo, some big projects up there too.
Yeah, we've got the best copper intervals in the world coming up from up there in the Ocoña district. And then you guys with the release yesterday, I think they'll be very globally significant drill assays as well. So very exciting all through the province and for copper in Argentina. It just depends on fiscal stability, I think, for a lot of the calls to be made. And Yeah, hopefully we see that tomorrow with some positive news from the Argentine Congress and the Malay's made pact getting approved. So you're watching that very closely.
One of the you comment there on drill intercepts, and I've got a sarcastic smile because look, it's undoubted. Like you can't deny that there are very significant intervals coming out of the northern part of San Juan, and we can also include Valeriano, Atex Resources Valeriano project on the Chilean side. So that 1,000-meter intervals, some of them start from 800 meters, 1,100 meters below surface. So we do need to keep these things in mind when we compare them with little old Pampa, which is doing 850-meter holes and getting mineralization from 50, because
it's huge difference.
Huge difference. And Atex's holes, top of the head numbers, some of their last holes I think are 2,100 meters deep, 2,200 meters deep, and mineralization's kicking in from literally 850 meters. So look, we think that we've got a bit of a standout opportunity in the region simply for the grade, the significant gold credits, but also the relative shallowness of our hits.
And also, I'm going to say cost of drilling as well, because I know Vicuña is up at around 5,000 meters altitude, and I can't even imagine what it costs to drill per meter there. You can look it up, but you guys are slightly lower. Infrastructure's historic and quite good, especially with the Glencore access road. Yeah, I just imagine the cost of drilling up there would be significantly more than it is down in the south too, which is the pro for Pampa.
One of the benefits and of our property, and something that certainly drew me to it the first time I visited, is the access. So as you and I both know, Jordan, when you visit some of these properties, they're in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes it's horseback access, heli drilling, barging rigs down rivers. Whereas here, we're talking about a property that we access from a Glencore maintained road outside of town of Barian, which has, fantastic access from both Mendoza and San Juan City. So access to our property is great. 3,700 meters. My understanding is that it's generally recognised from an OH&S standpoint that you can sleep at 3,700, meaning you can have camp and you can have permanent installations of that sort of altitude. Our camp, which you've visited, that's at 3,250 meters. And then we're probably 15 minutes or so drive to our drill pads. When you're up at 5,000 meters or at those sort of elevations, you have to have your camps at 3,700, which means you're transporting people up and down every day, which obviously adds to direct costs, but also reduces your productivity. And the higher the altitude, the more susceptible you are to weather conditions. So I think we've got a good address for a couple of reasons.
Just want to go back and maybe get the reasons why you were interested in this property in the first place, Joe, if you don't mind, because I know you have Mario, who's an old Chilean geologist working for you. He's a very good geologist. He really liked the properties for a number of years. That was my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Mario's 60-odd, Chilean, primarily porphyry geologist, some experience in gold. He'd worked extensively throughout the region for Barrick, Anglo, and a number of mid-tier companies over the years. He had an interest in the Pure Kenneth property in his time at Barrick and also with Anglo. So Pampa had historically been invested and exploring in Chile. And when, in the middle of last year, we started looking for new opportunities, Mario and I worked pretty extensively to try and put together a database of opportunities that made sense for Pampa and made sense both for technical reasons and commercial reasons. As we all know, markets are tough, so there's no point doing a deal when you don't think you can raise money. And therefore, our criterion was something that had historical drill intercepts and something that we thought would get accepted and recognised and validated by the market immediately. So when you're looking for porphyry opportunities with good grade in good jurisdictions in South America, they're very difficult to come by unless you've got a big checkbook. So one of the things that stood out for us about this opportunity was the grade. The deepest hole had been 580 meters. So some of these properties might only have 100-meter holes into them. 580 meters gave us some comfort that there was continuity of grade or continuity of a system here. And then the other big plus was the fact it had never been owned by a public company before. So you often find projects that have been kicked around between half a dozen, if not more, juniors. They might have undergone a few name changes, and then you pull them out and you're trying to rebadge it. This is something that we knew had never been held by a public company. It had had some work done on it by Inmet in the 90s and subsequently by Anglo in 2015-16. So for us, this was a standout opportunity. We liked the address. We liked Sun 1. We liked the access. We liked the historical intercepts. And we liked the fact that it was a new property. And I think we were able to do a deal on very attractive terms for a junior. So when we were putting together a list of targets, this was the clear number one, and the second target was some way behind.
Interesting. Also, what are your thoughts on why Aldebaran Michael was picked up the property, given how close it is basically to Alta?
So the Pure Kenneth property was originally pegged, if I'm not mistaken, in the 70s, and the same family that the same group that we did a deal with have been the owner ever since. Rio Tinto discovered or were the first mover on the Altar property in the 90s, and at that point in time, their view was that Altar was, when I say big enough, it was a big enough footprint, and Rio Tinto never felt the need to try and expand that footprint until they'd fully defined or fully understood the value in the land package. Since that time, there's been a number of discussions between the various owners of Altar following Rio's time and the Pure Kenneth owners. And I think a lot of the reason for a deal not having been executed is egos and diverging expectations. So I don't think anyone disputes the merit in tying up the two opportunities. It's just a question of relative value. My understanding is that the Pure Kenneth owners feel that Altar doesn't work unless they've got a high-grade, shallow deposit to actually get them off the mark. And if that's their mindset, then it's going to have been pretty difficult to do a deal with Aldebaran. So this is not a property that's unknown to Aldebaran or indeed any owner of Altar. And I just think purely for commercial reasons, a deal hasn't been possible.
Obviously, the film seasons will start after a week's time in the Southern Hemisphere. So we're looking around, I'm going to say October or even before.
Yes.
Basically, what's the plan? What's the plan straight off the bat when the field season opens?
So what I'm going to do now is just share a different screen, and I can't multitask. So this is a fairly simplistic map, but this looks at the Pure Kenneth Altar porphyry cluster. The Pure Kenneth central target here is the only drilled target on our property, and it's proximate to Pure Kenneth East, which sits between Altar North and Pure Kenneth Central, which is another outcropping porphyry with a soil anomaly and a strong geophysical anomaly that looks comparable in size to Pure Kenneth Central. So when we went into this transaction, we knew that we had two porphyries. The first one was definitely mineralized with high-grade copper and gold, The second one remained to be drill tested, but we also felt that there was uncharted or unmapped potential elsewhere on the property. So surface mapping work to date has been relatively limited outside of Pukenis Central and Pukenis East. The property here, and this is probably the wrong map to have shown actually, but this might only represent 600 hectares of the Pukenis property. There's an additional 1,200 hectares which sits to the north. So we've got a 1,880 hectare property which needs a lot of surface work, which we'll be able to start before we'd be able to start drilling. So we're probably going to be able to get back on site at some stage in August, not for the purposes of drilling, but for field mapping and some sort of structural work. And what we've already started is the reinterpretation of the historical IP and Halimag work. So the idea is that we've now got a window of opportunity to look at the historical database, more fully develop a property-wide program, which I would see including a reasonable amount of surface mapping, drill testing or step-out drill testing of Pukenis Central, drill testing of Pukenis East. It's probably a stretch to think that this year we're going to drill other targets other than Pukenis Central and Pukenis East. But the idea would be that there are other targets, there are other porphyries on this property that we will be able to bring online and drill test in future campaigns.
So, hold on, I have to put this in, but I just noticed how big the property is from this map. I didn't realise you have the whole other side of this mountain range. So,
yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So that's, and that hasn't been mapped. So that's just basically.
So what I'll, and there's no problem including this, the quality of the maps, the quality of the historical mapping is varied, and you haven't necessarily had quality work done over the entire property. So Party A's done a little bit on, this side, and Party B's done a little bit of work on the other side. So what you actually need, the holistic map, and that hasn't been done.
Yeah, very interesting.
The other point there is that there's points that we've validated on some of the historical mapping. I want to say validate. We've attempted to validate observations from some of the historical field mapping and formed a view that it's inaccurate.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I imagine it'd be a huge mess trying to stitch together all that historical data from different companies or whoever's had the land or whatever's been done by the government even.
So that's why, I think it is important for people to understand that we went into this thinking there's multiple porphyries, that we've got a large property to work that's going to take a couple of years. And when I say a couple of years, we're not talking 5 years, we're talking sort of, 2 years. But we had the starting point of Pukenis Central and its grade and its relative certainty. So I fear, and this could easily be our fault, but I fear that the market seems very fixated on Pukenis Central and doesn't actually appreciate that there's more to this story than just Pukenis Central. The market at the moment, I think, is looking for reasons, and not Pampa specifically, but the market's looking for reasons not to invest in things. So they're very quick to kill things and write things off at the moment. Whereas in bull markets, it's the total opposite, and people are sort of looking for reasons to invest. So our job and our work ahead of us is really around articulating this story and showing that Pukenis Central is one part, and there's a hell of a lot more on the property.
Let's just on the share price action, Joe. What do you think's going there? Because you just released some excellent results. Yeah, the stock went up, but you've literally released world-class copper gold assays in an area that's very hot at the moment. Argentina, there's a lot of eyes on it. There's a lot of there's a lot of hype around Argentine stocks, even in the last 6 months since Malay's come in. You can look at across the board at what stocks in Argentina have done. They've performed very well. But in your case, what do you think might be going on?
So, I mean, there won't be many CEOs and major shareholders concurrently that don't think their share price is undervalued. And I guess when I look at the pure chemist opportunity, I would say that Pampa was trading at 2.5 cents when we did this deal. We raised money at 16 cents following doing the deal. And then we raised some more money at 24 cents. And we're now trading at 30 cents. So what we have shown is I guess an I'm not going to say gradual because it's been since late November, but we've seen a build up in value, and it's a build up in value that we've been able to sustain. So in many respects, I have to say that, look, the share price has performed very strongly. Anyone that's invested in Pampa since we've done this deal has made money. I do think that the market isn't appreciating the upside on the rest of the property. And that's probably why we're seen perhaps as a one-trick pony, which has just got pure Guinness Central. The interesting, I guess, context for all this is that there's a lot of interest in Argentina, there's a lot of interest in copper, but markets, particularly in Canada, are very, very tough. And if you look at the relative performance of Pampa to a lot of copper stocks and a lot of juniors, we're a clear standout. So I think we're a victim of the market. And I also think that we're a little bit of a victim of our own success because there's very limited liquidity at the moment. There's liquidity in Pampa and the share price is going up. So unfortunately, I think that potentially attracts the attention of a lot of traders or people that have invested along the way. Their only source of liquidity is Pampa, relative to some of these other, juniors where they just don't trade.
Well, I don't know how much this would affect the share price really, but the fact that you guys are listed on the CSE and haven't made the move over to TSXV, I know I can't buy on the CSE on Interactive Brokers myself, so there's essentially a whole market of retail investors that are missing out on buying into this stock. Would that have any effect, you think, overall?
So I've spoken to a few people about this. So as an Australian myself, I can't buy CSE stocks other than through a Canadian broker. Whereas if you're on the TSXV, you can actually trade it through CommSec, NAB Trade, and all the Australian online trading platforms. You can trade,
which is huge because think of the big retail base that are interested in mining that come out of Australia and then don't have access to the CSE at all. Yeah, I honestly think it's probably making a difference.
So I mean, at PDAC. Coincidentally, I was at the booth next to Sendero, who is obviously also active in Argentina, and I had a chat with Michael, the chairman there. So he's a Hong Kong resident, and I was asking him this exact question because they listed on the TSXV. They brought in not insignificant money in their IPO out of Australia and Hong Kong, and he said they wouldn't have been able to do it via a CSE listing because Aussies and Hong Kong residents couldn't sort of access the TSXV. My understanding is that whilst the TSXV is seen as perhaps a stronger, more regulated exchange than the CSE within Canada, it doesn't make a huge difference for Canadian investors, but for anyone outside Canada, it does. So to go back to your question, I think it's something that we need to do. We want to move to the TSXV. The other thing which I'm not sure, I don't have it. The TSXV, I can definitively say that I think we're better off being on the TSXV. The question also comes as to whether a company like Pampa would be better received on a different exchange. And I'm referring specifically to, say, the ASX there. Yeah. So if you look at those drill holes that we published this week, I firmly believe that if they were published on the ASX, you wouldn't be at a 20 mil market cap. I think you'd be significantly higher. So we do have some work to do around our, exchange and getting that right. And it's something that we're seriously looking at and take as a priority.
You can get done exploration wise and with the current balance before another potential raise.
So, I mean, the reality is that we haven't raised a lot of money since we did this deal. We raised at 16 cents, we raised 1.6 million. We had about 800 grand that came in from the option exercise. Sorry, the accelerated warrant exercise at that time. And then we raised 2 million in last month, April. So we've raised about 4.4 million since doing this deal. What we've tried to do along the way is be opportunistic about it, meaning when you're a junior, the challenge is people always assume you come raising and they always think you're going to raise 10 million bucks. So we've just tried to be a bit opportunistic. We didn't need to raise that last 2 million. Share price was trading well. We had plenty of people that wanted to invest, so we took the opportunity to raise another 2 million. That 2 million won't fund another drill program, but what it does is it buys us time to do these off-field activities that I mentioned earlier, and I think better build out a story and bring in supportive long-term shareholders. So to try and answer that question as directly as I can, in order to do a next season drill campaign, we might very well be able to mobilise with our current cash reserves and sort of say, okay, we're gonna take the risk here that we're gonna get drilling, raise money once we've got a drill rig turning, and because the challenge with raising in tough market, well, in any market, but particularly in a tough market, is people want immediate news flow and results. So what we would never do is raise money when we can't say this is the outcomes that you get or this is the news flow you get for those results. So to make sure I'm not ducking and weaving the question, that we raised probably 2 million that wasn't to fund necessarily the last drill program. It's off-field work that'll pay for. And I think what we'll do now is we'll work out our story, show the upside of the property, and I don't see us as doing a big raise that is taken up by a wide investor base. I'd see us raising some money and bringing in 2 or 3. I say strategic. I'm not referring to strategic mining companies, but perhaps a couple of funds that are interested in taking a meaningful investment.
How's the Sound One government? How's their reception to you guys? Because they're currently mining-friendly jurisdiction, and obviously no copper comes out of there, and there's full of these idling copper mines. What's the reception been like from them? From what I understand, it's really good.
So I've got a wry smile on my face because it's a very interesting place, San Juan, the city of San Juan. So Mendoza's obviously a lot of international tourism, vineyards, lots of foreigners running around. San Juan is a couple of hours down the road, or if that, and has very little foreign influence. So it's a beautiful little province that has some wine production, but they have something like, and I'm sure you know this number better than I do, something like 80% of the population is on the state payroll, either as a public sector employee or as a pensioner. So when you go and talk to the San Juan mines ministry, these are the sort of numbers they'll tell you themselves. And they'll point to their need to get people off the government payroll. And they used the Veladero, the Barrick gold mine, as sort of like their case study for saying this is how we can reinvent the San Juan economy and try and get people off the payroll. So when you're a junior company such as Pampa and you go into San Juan, you can literally turn up on the morning and you might have to wait half an hour, but you'll be able to see the mines minister. If he's not there, you'll see his technical offsider, you'll see, someone within his inner circle. Mario, the technical offsider, so the technical secretary of the mines minister worked for Mario for a number of years. So Natalia is someone who knows the project, knows us, and we have very good and regular communication with them. They're also the sort of people where they'll help you out. If you say, we want to do this, this, and this, can you ring such and such an entity, so the water agency, that they'll do it. So I think, yeah.
How closely are they keeping an eye on your project? So are they visiting the drill rig often, the campsite?
So they haven't yet. They have been invited. So that'll happen at the start of next season, I imagine. What they have done is, I've gone to their offices how many times. A couple of those times, photographers come out, they take the happy snaps and they put it on their online portals and everything. So they're very keen to promote themselves as open for business, and they're very keen to promote themselves as, being a good source for copper exploration. So, it's a fantastic place, or it's been a fantastic place to operate so far. The other thing that's important to mention there is, because Purkenis is an old project, when I say it's an old project, there's a quirk, at least in San Juan, where when you make a mineral discovery, you can convert the mining titles into minas. So if you take rock chip samples and say, there's 5% copper, 5 grams of gold in this, we've made a mineral discovery, they convert into perpetual mining licenses.
Just like that? Like the
mineral discovery.
Wait, is that easy to get a mining license in San Juan?
So this could easily be a different regime, but in property in the 90s, a mineral discovery was declared. So they presented assays, they showed something and said, here's a mineral discovery, and it becomes a mina. Now, that doesn't mean you've got an environmental license to mine,
Okay.
But it means the obligations of the title change. And since the 90s, these guys have had a environmental license over the whole property for the purposes of exploration. So this is a fully permitted project from an exploration standpoint. A mineral discovery's been made, and the land taxes are something like $1,000 a year. So when we go and deal with the San Juan government, it's in the context of a property that's fully permitted for everything we're trying to do. The only thing that we have, and so every 2 years you have to refresh your environmental license by putting in a document that says no material change. And you also have to refresh your water license. So the water license is from the San Juan government, and that's the only. You just renew it every year. So to try and get back to the question, dealing in San Juan's easy, but I say that from the context of a property where you're already fully permitted.
Yeah, which give you guys a huge advantage, in my view.
Yeah.
Anything else we haven't covered, Joe? You want to go through that?
I don't think so. So we talked a bit about how we found the property. We talked about recent results. We talked about how the work now is around, building out the story other than in Purkenis Central. We talked about the share price performance and how I think, we've had a very significant re-rate on the back of this deal, but I think there's still a lot of upside to come, and we need to seriously look at our listing. So whether it's TSXV and Australia, we definitely need to tweak things there. And yeah, we raised some money opportunistically to sort of fund this next phase of surface work and off-season work. So there's no kind of immediate plans or requirement to raise money.
Yeah, and if we zoom out and we look at the overall macro and economic environment that could be coming up in Argentina and the improved fiscal stability, I think it's a very compelling project and stock. So that's why I'm quite taken back by it. It was really kind of promoting it on my channel. And like I said before to you guys, I get approached by a number of companies for the publicity. And yeah, I've stuck to Pampa, not because of any other reason, but that I like the drilling intercepts, I like the project, and I like the potential. So it's quite simple to me. Let the assays do the talking. Let the step out of this next drilling to the northeast. Let's have a look at Pearkennis East. Get some mapping done on that large property right next to some giant deposits, which could see some heightened interest as we see things improve with the fiscal and economic condition of Argentina. So yeah, thanks very much, Joe. I really appreciate you coming on, mate. I'd love to do this again. In the short term.
Always happy to have a call. And obviously you were out at site. How long ago was that now? That was a couple
of months ago, yeah. February.
Yeah. And look, let's pencil in. So I think we should be drilling October. So we'll be drilling again some stage in October. So let's pencil in another site visit for, last quarter of this year.
Sounds great to me, mate. Really, really appreciate it. Cool.
Not a problem at all.
All right. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for that.